Welcome to our webinar on current cyber threats and best practices to defend against them. As I'm sure many of you know, cyber threats keep coming and changing and evolving, and we all need to be well prepared. I want to tell you a little bit about the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits. We are the New Jersey state organization for charitable nonprofits. We provide advocacy. We were just in Washington on Tuesday talking to representatives in Washington, but also obviously we do a lot of work here in Trenton on behalf of nonprofit organizations. We do research, we provide education like these webinars and our conference in December, which I'll tell you about toward the end. We have a help desk. You can contact us if you have questions about running your organization, about legal issues, about resources for anything for marketing to IT, etc. We can help you find the services that you need. Member benefits, we are a member organization. So our members get additional service, more in-depth help desk service. They get free job postings, at least a discount on everything we do that there's a fee for, such as this webinar. And so we try to give you some extra value there. It's well worth it for most organizations, and it helps keep us doing what we're doing and supporting the nonprofit community. We are also members of the National Council of Nonprofits. As you can see, I'd like you to see the map because I want you to know that wherever you are, and if you have colleagues or friends that are in other parts of the country, there are state organizations to support charitable nonprofits all around. So be sure to go to them and ask them for resources and learn about what's going on in that state. So right now I want to welcome Krista Valenzuela, who is with the New Jersey Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Cell. Big, long title. But anyway, Krista is part of the state forces that are helping us keep safe from cyber threats and teaching us about how to protect ourselves too. So let me stop sharing. And Krista, thank you very much for being here and for doing this for us.
Thank you very much for having me this morning. I'll get my slide deck up here. You should be able to see it in just a moment. Alrighty, so if you have any trouble hearing me or seeing any of the slides, just let me know. But thanks for the introduction. I will be talking about the current threat landscape, the cyber threat landscape, those tactics and techniques that are being used right now, and then how to identify those and protect ourselves against these various threats. For a loose agenda of the different topics that we'll cover this morning, and it'll be the just normal activity that we're seeing, and then those different threat categories, which include social engineering, credential compromise, we'll go through that. Of course, ransomware is still out there, and then we'll briefly touch on artificial intelligence and geopolitics and how that relates to the different cyber threats that we see. And then, of course, a last slide on just reminders of those cyber resiliency strategies to help defend against these various threats. Very briefly about the NJ Kick. So we call it the NJ Kick because that name is so cumbersome. We feel so we just had our 10th anniversary and we were like, well, I think it's too late now to change the name. So the NJ Kick it is. But we work at the state's New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. That's essentially our parent company, our parent organization. We are their cybersecurity division. And so we are charged with defending the state from cyber attacks, making us more resilient. We do that through our three different bureaus that we have. The two bureaus on the outsides here, it's security engineering and cyber operations. They defend what we call the Garden State Network. That's a network that the executive branch at state government, those various departments and agencies, we all connect to this one large network. Then our governance, risk, and compliance team, they work with those departments and agencies on doing security reviews, vulnerability testing, ensuring compliance with the various policies that we have in place. And so they're much more inward facing in concerning ourselves with defending the state government. But what we do in cyber threat outreach and partnerships at Middle Bureau, where I'm the bureau chief for, We are more externally facing. So we share different threat intelligence, those best practices, risk reduction measures, like we're going to be talking about today. But it's worth mentioning those other bureaus because a lot of the information that we get on those different tactics and techniques and what we're seeing, we can then share that information through our external, to our external partners, to our membership. And so we get a lot of unique information from those other bureaus from our own network. Just kind of start off the meat of the presentation here of the different cyber threats. I often start out with this slide. This information comes from the Internet Crime Complaint Center. This is run by the FBI, and it's a website you can go to, ic3.gov, and you can report cybersecurity incidents to them. This is voluntary reporting. This isn't necessarily where you would go for assistance, but you're just letting them know I fell victim to this. This is how many losses I incurred from this threat. And you can see over the past couple of years that the total cybercrime losses for those victims has increased exponentially. We were at $16.6 billion in 2024. Again, this is voluntary reporting. So the actual scope of losses from cybercrime is much higher than this. But if we take a look at the number of complaints or number of reports that the IC3 has received over those past couple of years, that hasn't changed that much. Those numbers, they fluctuate a little bit. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because if you look at those two data points, it's telling us that it's becoming more costly to be a victim of cybercrime. So those losses are increasing per incident. And so it's something that we need to be aware of as we try to help defend against them and really understand the scope of this problem. If we break down that report a little bit further into the different cybercrime types, you can see the losses associated with each of those. The total for cyber-enabled fraud is about 13.7 billion of that 16.6 billion. So fraud is rampant. And if we look at the top cybercrime types, investment is the highest. We won't really discuss that specifically because a lot of those are cryptocurrency investment scams. And these are specifically targeting those trying to quote unquote invest in cryptocurrency. There's a lot of fraudulent websites out there. So just a word of caution, if you're approached by somebody, particularly online, that wants you to invest in cryptocurrency, really have a high degree of skepticism and exercise a lot of caution. A lot of these other cybercrime types, though, we will touch on this morning in the presentation. Business email compromise is the second highest. Those are typically your
Hello,
invoice
this is
type of
David.
scams. And so we'll go through those and discuss what they look like and how they can impact individual businesses and organizations. Then we'll go through a couple of others as well. A good portion of the presentation is going to be on social engineering. But social engineering is really present in most, I would say the majority of cybersecurity incidents, as this is just kind of like a fancy term for saying manipulation, social engineering. It's where a cyber criminal is trying to convince their target that they are a legitimate person, they're from a legitimate company, or that their request is legitimate in some way. And so this is where that human nexus comes in, where there has to be a human that takes some sort of action for their attempts, their cyber operations to be successful. And so the first one we'll discuss this morning is tech support scams. Now, this is a threat that's been around for several years. And the reason we keep mentioning it, though, is because people still fall victim to this. There was a variation of a tech support scam that occurred just the other day. We got an incident report, so I'll go through that incident in a moment. But these tech support scams, oftentimes it's somebody who's online, maybe they're surfing the web, if you will, trying to it doesn't even matter what they're trying to do. Oftentimes it's just a pop-up that somehow comes up, or they are directed to a website, and there's this message that makes it seem like the individual's accounts, online accounts, or their laptop or device in general has been compromised, or it's infected with malware, something along those lines. And it'll provide a phone number for that individual to call. If they call that number, they're likely going to be met with somebody who identifies themselves as somebody from a trusted organization like Microsoft, maybe a law enforcement organization like the FBI, like a bank fraud department, something along those lines that it enables a sense of that individual to have trust in who they're talking to. And so they'll say that their online accounts, so there's suspicious activity, or there's suspicious activity on the device itself, and they'll convince that individual to provide them with remote access to their device. This is where that human component comes in because that potential victim, that target, has to allow that scammer, that fraudster, to be able to remotely access their device. And if they grant that, then that criminal has access to all the information on their device. They can install malware potentially. They could steal information from their browsers. And why that is concerning is because a lot of people, when you're on Chrome or Firefox and you're going to log into your online accounts, you're often prompted to save your username and password within the browser itself. This is separate from a password manager, just within the browser. Hey, for next time, do you want us to remember this? And it's really convenient, so a lot of people do it. However, if you provide remote access to your device, a cybercriminal could then steal that information from your browsers and essentially steal all of your passwords to your online accounts. And so, oftentimes that's what they're looking to do, but sometimes they might just make some sort of scheme up that maybe somebody's trying to access your bank account. And this was an incident that happened a couple years ago, where a woman was targeted with this scam. And when she called the number, they said they were from Microsoft. They're working with the FBI on this investigation. Or I'm sorry, they were with Chase and they were working with FBI on this investigation and convinced her to move her money from her online bank account to one that they had control over because they needed to conduct this investigation. They were trying to find this criminal who was trying to gain access to her money. And they told her the investigation was going to last about 30 days. And they kept in contact with her for that entire 30 days. When the 30th day came, she could not contact them. They did not contact her back. The account that they had targeted in this case was her investment account, so probably an IRA of some sort, something along those lines. The money, so she wasn't a wealthy individual. However, accounts like that are meant for retirement or for investments oftentimes do have quite a bit of money in them. She had 830 over $838,000 in that account that she had moved over to one that they had control over. Because 30 days had passed before she realized that this was a scam, she did not get that money back. We did refer this to the FBI, but after that many days, the individuals behind this scheme were likely not U.S. Based. They were probably in a foreign country. It's unlikely that we're going to be able to figure out who it was that did that and to get her money back for her. So just make sure people know about this scam so that they don't fall victim as well. There was a recent one that happened. They were trying to get to Roku, TV support, I believe it was, and just searched on Google, and the first pop-up made it seem like it was actually Roku that they would be in contact with, but it ended up being some sort of fraudulent website, and they ended up talking to a fraudulent individual, cyber criminal, and convinced them to log into their PayPal and to their bank account and attempted to steal money from them. So there's definitely variations of this type of scam that are out there. Information stealers, just a brief note on this. This is a type of malware that can steal, as the name implies, information from your devices. This is something that might be installed on somebody's device if they're given remote access to it. These are also delivered via email, though, as well. So just exercise caution with anything that you open, whether it's a link or a document, an attachment that comes via email. SMS text scams. This is a big one. And so we had a lot circulating. I'm sure there are actually probably several of you on the call today that may have received a text message in the past couple of weeks that impersonated the New Jersey, it says DMV, we call it MVC in New Jersey, Motor Vehicle Commission or Department of Motor Vehicles, stating that there was a traffic violation and you had to pay them for that traffic violation, or else all of these things would happen. If you did go to that website, it was asking for your payment card information, which would be stolen by that cyber threat actor. Other variations of this that are very common, the slight variation actually on that one is the toll services one, where it makes it seem like you owe them a toll. That there's an example of that on the bottom right-hand side here. And this is again where we're starting to see a bit of that social engineering, that psychology in how they conduct these types of scams or phishing schemes. They're saying that you owe $13. There's other ones that we've seen that it's only $4 that they're saying that you owe. And because that number is low in that toll amount, it makes it more likely that somebody is going to just pay that. They might think to themselves, well, I don't know if I actually owe a toll, but I'm gonna get this late fee if I don't pay it. I might as well just pay it. It's not that much money. And so if a lot of people think that though, That ends up being a lot of money for that cyber criminal behind the scenes. And so then the link that they use is njtollservices.com. It's a convincing link. And there's another variation on that where it's like njeasypass.com. So it incorporates NJ so that's been circulating as well. These are fraudulent in nature. If you did actually owe a toll or had a traffic violation, they would send you a piece of paper mail. It wouldn't come to you via text message. The NBC actually in New Jersey said the only time they really will text you is when they're just confirming appointments. That's it. And you can see there's another example of the USPS, FedEx, UPS. They're very often impersonated as well. We see an increase in this type of text message during the holiday season because a lot of people are making purchases online. And so if they receive an email like this, they might not be as suspicious of it. Might be more likely to click on a link. The one on the right-hand side at the top here, that's impersonating JP Morgan Chase. And this one's a little bit different than the other ones in that it's not trying to get you to click on a link. It's not asking for sensitive information. It's just saying, oh, there was an attempt on your account. Did you authorize it? Yes or no? This is an example of why we shouldn't ever really answer any text messages unless we know they're actually legitimate and official. Because these cyber criminals have access to databases with thousands, millions of phone numbers that have been exposed in various data breaches over the years. But these cyber criminals don't know which phone numbers are still active. And an easy way for them to figure that out is to send this mass text message claiming that they're trying to attempt a Zelle payment and then ask them to answer yes or no. That's it. And so because it's just asking for a reply, more people are going to actually answer that text message. But if that cybercriminal knows that you have an active phone number, it means that they can target you in other text message scams, voice-based scams, which we call vishing, where they might call you on the phone. And there's some other variations of text message scams on the left-hand side here as well. These are very prevalent. Companies and organizations now use text messages to talk to their clients and customers in official capacity more often. And so because of that, we it's hard for us as the end user, the receiver of these, to know which ones are official, which ones aren't. And it's becoming more and more difficult to know that too. And we're getting fatigued. I mean, if you make a doctor's appointment, they ask you to verify that you're going to be at that doctor's appointment about 4 times, before you get there. And so we get fatigued by all of these communications. We might end up clicking a link that we shouldn't, or answering one that we shouldn't as well. For direct deposit scams here, these are very common too. It's the organization itself that's going to be targeted in these types of scams, and they will be impersonating an employee, stating that they have a new bank account, they have to change the direct deposit information. So while the organization is the victim because they're going to end up paying somebody's paycheck to the wrong account, the employee is also a kind of a secondary victim here in that they will be paid at some point because the company has to pay them, but they're probably going to get their paycheck late. And so for a lot of people who live paycheck to paycheck, that could be quite detrimental to them as well. Up here are official direct deposit forms. I had done a presentation to schools not that long ago. These are not New Jersey-based schools. I didn't want to pick on New Jersey. But this shows us how much information is available online. I went to Google and I put in quotes direct deposit and then in quotes school or school district. And you'll get a bunch of PDF forms for direct deposits. And the reason this is bad is because if somebody at that school or that organization receives an email from somebody who looks like they're an employee and they have the official direct deposit form filled out, that individual at that organization is probably going to just assume that is that employee. There's nothing that seems off about that. They have the official forms, and it's why we should keep official forms like this internal. They should not be publicly accessible. Gift card scams are going to be up next here. So there's a couple of examples. Sometimes they'll start off via email or via text message. Hi, how are you? Are you available? Sometimes it just starts off like that, and then trying to get a conversation going. And then that was an example that actually we got. It was a interfaith or one of the house of worship that we work with. There's a couple of examples here actually from one was a rabbi, one was a reverend. And so you can see that they try to use somebody who has a sense of authority to be that person that they're going to impersonate, asking them to go out and buy gift cards for them, send the codes on the back of them, and they'll pay you back later. On the right-hand side here, this is one that circulated a couple of years ago. It was impersonating the mayor of Newark. He ran for governor in the primaries, Ross Baraka. Sent it to somebody in Newark, and it was the same type of thing. You know, they're going to impersonate somebody who has that authority because then they don't want their target to question that request. So if you ever get one of these, definitely have a sense of or exercise caution, have skepticism towards that request. For business email compromise, this is the one that I mentioned before. That's the second most costly or the second highest losses that are incurred. Business email compromise is oftentimes those invoice scams. The vendor or third party is going to be impersonated, and they will send an email usually to that targeted organization, stating that they're owed money. There's this invoice for services or goods that have been rendered, and they'll provide a new bank account information, and it's very, very prevalent, and the losses are very high. And there's a couple of reasons for this. These types of emails are a bit different than the other ones that we'll have a couple of examples where they're trying to get you to click on a link to provide sensitive information or try to get you to put your passwords in. These emails often don't have a malicious link. They don't have a malicious attachment. It's simply the impersonation of somebody that they think they know or do business with and asking for an action to be taken, in this case, for money to be sent to an account. The reason this is bad is because if there's no malicious link or attachment that's included, it's taking away things that an email security tool would use to identify something as phishing. And so if an email security tool can identify this as a malicious or suspicious email, it's much more likely to end up in somebody's inbox. That alone is a reason why this is more successful. The more malicious emails get to somebody's inbox, the more likely are to take some sort of action. In addition, the impersonation is easy. The impersonation of the vendor is pretty simple. They can figure out who they want to impersonate at that vendor, that third party. They can figure out information from LinkedIn, from that company's website. There's a lot of information out there. They can steal logos, do display name spoofing, which I think I have an example coming up on a later slide of display name spoofing. So they use that stolen branding, the logos. They can create a fraudulent signature block and to make it look more official. In the public sector, this is even more true in some cases. If you are going to be using taxpayer money for work or through working with a vendor, a lot of that information is public. So you go out and get bids from various contractors, for example, if you need work to be done on a building. And then who wins that contract and how much that contract is for, all of that is made public. So it's even more information that's available now for a cyber criminal to use. Procedural changes could help to thwart these attempts. And the same thing is true with those direct deposit scams. If you have that secondary level of checks where you have to call that individual, call that vendor on the phone with the official phone numbers that you have for them to verify the information that's included in these emails, a lot of the times you'll be alerted to the fact that this is actually in fact fraudulent. There was an example that we heard anecdotally from our partners at CISA, the Federal Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. There was an attempt for business email compromise, this invoice scam. And the person who received it, they ended up calling the woman that usually sends those emails, not because she wanted to check the payment information, but because the email that they received didn't have as many like emojis and exclamation points as they usually do. So she called just to make sure she was doing okay. She wanted to make sure that everything was all right. And so, that is what we should be doing, though. It was making those phone calls, verifying the information we get. But luckily, they were able to thwart that attempt that way. And that kind of leads us this is an example which is going to lead us nicely into the next section. While normally in these business email compromise schemes, it's just a fraudulent email account. It's not official. But sometimes what happens is an email account gets hacked. And actually, oftentimes an email account gets hacked. And so you might receive that email from an official email account that you've communicated with before. And that's what happened in this case. A school district, they received this email from a vendor regarding a payment that was due. They told them, we can't accept checks at this time. You have to ACH it to this account, which is to essentially to transfer the money to a different account. And it was over $100,000, and the payment was initiated to this fraudulent account. The school realized this was a malicious attempt, we believe, because the vendor realized that that email account had been hacked and notified the school. So they were able to reverse that transfer in time from their bank. So there was actually no monetary loss, luckily, in this incident. But in this case, that vendor email account was hacked. And so in these cases, it's even more difficult to realize that something is off. Which again goes back to making those phone calls with the official numbers that you have for these people that you do business with to verify this information. A lot of it's redacted on the right hand side, but there was a whole thread that they shared with us of them going back and forth with this individual on figuring out how to make the ACH payment. They had to get board approval to make this payment even. So they went through that whole process to do that. And so that again leads us nicely into this section, which is credential compromise, which basically is hacked accounts or trying to get access to your accounts, get access to your passwords, to gain access to your accounts, unauthorized access. And so we oftentimes think of, phishing emails where they have this link, and you click on it and you put they just want your payment card information. They want your bank account information. But oftentimes, what they actually want is just your login information. And it could be for a bank account, but it could be for various other accounts as well. This is an example of what's called quishing. The cybersecurity community loves to make up these little names for these different threats. It's QR code phishing. And we're seeing this, we've definitely saw an uptick during the pandemic as we started using QR codes more often. At that time, it was for, mostly menus and such. But we're using these more often now in general. The problem with QR codes is that when you go, if you have an iPhone and you use your camera app, the link that it starts to show you when you hover is a very, very shortened link. You don't actually know where it is that you are going to be directed to if you click on that link. So there's that, you're losing that checks and balance there before you end up going to that link. And there, people are less suspicious or they're more comfortable using QR codes now too. And so people might be more likely to click on that link. This one here was an example. It was referencing a employee handbook update. And if you clicked on that, you'd be brought to a page asking for your Adobe sign-in. And it actually says for your the login with your email provider. So it's saying that you need to log in to view the PDF document, log in with your normal email address and password. If you put that information in there, it's stolen by the cyber threat actor behind this scheme, and they can then gain access to your email account. And then they can send out this same or similar email where they're targeting all of your contacts as well. That is why a main reason why they want access to these email accounts is because they want to be able to use your account to target all of your contacts. If that email comes from somebody that somebody trusts, an account that that person trusts, they're much more likely to click on a link or open an attachment or provide that sensitive information. This is another recent example. It was impersonating Intuit QuickBooks. This was a more well done impersonation and phishing email for several reasons. I said I was going to mention what display name spoofing is. So display name spoofing, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but Intuit QuickBooks, that sender information, that is the display name that comes before the email address. That display name is very, very easily changed. If you have like a Gmail account and you go to accounts, it's like 3 clicks and you get a free form to put in whatever you want. So I can change my display name to anything. And that's what these individuals often do to try to get it to seem like this is an official email. But the email address associated with this as well, the QBKS or QuickBooks at intuit.net also seems very official because intuit.net. And then if you look down at the email itself, the email body, it's this link that says www.intuit.com. That is not the URL that you end up going to, but you can also change that to be whatever display you want it to be, even though the URL of the webpage you're going to is not that at all. And if you did click on that, you'd be brought to this page, and it has this login page here, its login form, and that also looks official. If you were to go to the legitimate login page for Intuit, it likely would look just like this. Stealing the website look and feel, these login screens, logos, all of that is trivial for these cyber criminals to do. So you have to pay very close attention to those URLs, the web page domain, before you do anything on that website, because everything else might look fine. And if you did put your information here again, that information would be stolen by that cyber threat actor, and then they can access your account. Intuit QuickBooks is used for a lot of things, not only for accounting service, like accounts payable and all of that stuff. It can also be used for tax, to submit taxes and stuff like that. And so if you are using it for that purpose, theoretically or potentially these cyber criminals can then steal your tax refunds as well. So what do we do? So I said they're looking for access to our email accounts, these other online services. We have a couple of means to help bolster our account security. One of the major ones is multi-factor authentication. A lot of us are already doing this. Hopefully, all of us are already doing this in some fashion, and at least some of our online accounts. It's a combination of at least two of three factors. Something we know, so it's going to be like a password. Something we have, which is likely a code, or something that we are, which would be a biometric, like your Face ID or fingerprint. And the reason that we highly encourage multi-factor is because, we're not infallible as humans. We might fall for one of these phishing scams, and we might put our password in. Well, if we put our password in and this cyber criminal tries to log into our online accounts and we have MFA, multi-factor enabled, they're going to put our password in, and then that individual is going to be prompted for that second factor. So for that code or for that biometric. And if that cyber criminal doesn't have access to either of those things, they will not access your online account. So it makes your passwords less important, essentially, less effective or less meaningful for those cyber criminals. I I think on average, a user has between 100 and 250 online accounts, which sounds like a lot, except oftentimes we set up these accounts, we don't delete them if we're no longer using them. And then if you try to view a news article these days, they want you to create an account with them. And so they're all trying to get us to create these online accounts, probably to sell our data. But we don't go back and delete those. And so our information is likely stored somewhere and then it gets out there. But these cyber criminals now, or not the cyber criminals, but for our online accounts, are we having unique and complex passwords for all of those 100 to 250 accounts? No, of course not. We're human beings. We can't be expected to remember all of that. And so you might be using a password manager to help with that, which is great. And because we are probably going to be reusing passwords if we're not using some sort of service like a password manager. So our passwords are weak, and that's why we need multi-factor there. And a note on weak passwords, because I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding with what it means to be a weak password. It's not just password 123. It's not just the 6-character passwords. It's also passwords like spring 2025 exclamation point or something more common like common sports teams, stuff like that. Even if you're getting the complexity requirements, you have at least 12 characters, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, a special character. There's a lot of people who use similar passwords and we just don't know it. So the spring 2025 exclamation point, that's a very, very, very common password because you probably are changing your password every 90 days or so. That corresponds with the seasons. And so that is a very weak password because even if your account is not compromised, you don't put your password into a fraudulent account, somebody else might, and then your password is exposed even if it wasn't exposed by you. So just keep that in mind. You can do passphrases, maybe your favorite song. Have a very long password, something that you can easily remember, but somebody else it would be hard for them to guess. And of course, using multi-factor. As we've all started to implement multi-factor authentication more often, and we're protecting our accounts this way, the cyber criminals are going to try to find ways to bypass this. It's that whole cat and mouse thing that we've been going through, not only, with regular criminal or traditional criminals as well as cyber criminals. And so just be aware of this and that you should really safeguard that MFA code, if that's what you're using, as much as possible. If you're prompted to do that multi-factor authentication code, just ensure that you are at the official websites. If you can use an authentication app, like Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator or a hardware token. Those are better options as well instead of those text message codes. The reason is because those codes you get through the app or through a hardware token are only valid for 30 to 60 seconds. The text messages that you get, those codes, or if you get the code via email, whatever, those are usually good for at least 15 minutes to several hours. And the reason that's bad is just because that gives a cyber criminal more opportunity, more time to try to get that code from you. Try to manipulate them to giving you their code or give them your code. And so there are better methods that are available, but any method of MFA is better than none at all. So how are these passwords compromised? And we went through a couple of these already. The information stealing malware, social engineering, so you fall for one of these phishing emails, for example. The dark web. There's a lot of sharing of passwords on the dark web via cyber criminals just sharing them on forums or selling them on marketplaces. And then credential stuffing, which is using stolen credentials. So these passwords that are out there on many different websites. Oftentimes, those also come from data breaches. When I say data breaches, that I'm referring to these different companies that you're giving your information to. So, Chase Bank, I'll pick on them again, or Amazon or whoever. When you're establishing an account with them, you're providing them with information. Every time you do business with one of those services or you log in, they're collecting data. They have data on you. And sometimes these companies have what's called data breaches. And that might happen by accident. Maybe there's a database that's exposed to the internet that they didn't know about, or a malicious threat actor steals data off of their network. Or there's an insider threat. There's many ways in this can be exposed, but that then leaves you open. So you're entrusting these companies, these organizations, and sometimes they fall victim themselves. So moving on to ransomware here. So ransomware has changed a bit, quite a bit over the last 10 years, but in the last 5 years, we've really seen this be a full-on business model for these cyber criminals. And there are three major players within the ransomware threat landscape. We have these access brokers, these affiliates, and the operators. The access brokers are the ones who initially gain access to a network. I had said before that they're looking for our information for our accounts and our passwords. That might also be just for our access to a network. You have to log into your computer, you have to log into maybe you're using some sort of cloud service like Microsoft 365. That also gives some sort of network access to. And those can be precursors to ransomware incidents. And so these access brokers gain that access and that foothold into a network, the targeted network, and then they don't do anything at that point. They sell that access to these ransomware as a service affiliates. The affiliates are the ones that actually launch these ransomware attacks. And they do so using the tools, these ransomware tools that are developed and maintained by the ransomware as a service operators. So it's more of an automated process, like they're using these programs to launch these attacks. And so the affiliate, when they launch the ransomware attack, they first gain access to that network from the access broker. They'll oftentimes steal data off of that network first, and then they'll launch the ransomware attack. And when the ransomware attack occurs, essentially what's happening is they're locking all of the information on that network, and they're the only ones with the key. And they tell that victim, well, if you don't have copies of everything that you can back up so you can restore from, then you can pay me the ransom and I'll give you the key to get all your stuff back. That's essentially what's happening here. And I'm sorry, for the affiliate, if when they launch the attack against the victim, if the victim does pay a ransom, that ransom payment will go directly to the operator. And the operator will send a percentage of that ransom payment to those affiliates. That's kind of how that business model works. So the affiliate is paying both those other key players to use their resources and tools, and then for a cut of that ransom payment. And so this is just a couple of statistics about ransomware. Now, the ransom amount, I really should even take off that statistic because it depends on what company you are getting a report from regarding what the average amount really is. It fluctuates between several 100,000 to a couple of million. But that number isn't even all that important because the recovery and remediation costs from a ransomware incident, even if you pay the ransom, exceeds that ransom payment in most cases, and by quite a bit. And we'll go through a more extreme example in the next couple of slides. But those remediation recovery costs, I don't think that organizations really understand how costly those can get. And that's a particular concern for those who don't have cyber insurance. Cyber insurance, there's what we're calling kind of a cyber insurance poverty line that's occurring now. It is becoming very costly to have cyber insurance. Premiums have gone up, deductibles have gone up, and so we have a lot of those small to medium-sized businesses who do not, and organizations who do not, they can't afford cyber insurance. Which means, though, that if they are targeted in one of these incidents, those costs are also going to be quite high. And then there's a concern about whether they can actually recover from those incidents and keep their doors open. As I said before, data exfiltration or stealing that data happens in most cases. This is a what we call a double extortion tactic. If a targeted organization says, "Well, we have data backups, we're not going to pay the ransom," the cyber criminals will be like, "Okay, but I stole a bunch of data from you, and I'm going to publicly post it if you don't pay me the ransom." And that threat alone is enough that a lot of these organizations will then pay, even if they have backups to restore their network. And so much so that we're actually seeing these incidents where there's no locking, there's no using that key to lock up the resources on the network. They're just stealing data and then threatening to post it if they're not paid a ransom. The top attack vectors are phishing. So somebody falls victim to a phishing scam. They provide their email and password that enables that access to that network. And then remote access connections can then be exploited as well. Small to medium-sized businesses are targeted quite a bit. They don't get the same news or the same focus from news organizations and on these various websites talking about these incidents because their cascading impacts might be smaller or more contained than a larger corporation. But they're targeted quite a bit. Medium-sized businesses and organizations in particular, because they are big enough to have sensitive data, but they're small enough that they don't have the same budgets available for cybersecurity, and therefore their networks might be more vulnerable to cyber attack. And as I mentioned before, as far as recovery is concerned, they might be more likely to pay a ransom because it might be more costly for them to recover otherwise from an incident. So I'm going to go through this case study of Change Healthcare. A lot of you might have heard about this. It happened in February of 2024, but is an interesting kind of incident and sort of the remediation and all of that, going through that whole process. So Change Healthcare, it's a subsidiary or their parent company is United Health. I did not hear of Change Healthcare until this incident happened. Probably a lot of people didn't either, because they're kind of behind the scenes. But they're the provider of revenue and payment management for healthcare providers and patients in the United States. They process about half of all medical claims in the United States. And you can see who that's for: the physicians, pharmacies, hospitals, and labs. On February 21st, ransomware attack had targeted Change Healthcare. Their services were completely down for 5 days, but were down. They weren't completely back up and running for full operations for a lot longer than that. During this incident, approximately 4 terabytes of protected health information, PHI, was stolen. That's the equivalent of roughly 150 hours of high definition recordings or 4 million high quality photos. So just trying to give an idea of how much 4 terabytes really is. And this is just of text. A lot of this is just text information of protected health information, so it's a lot of data. We'll go back to that in a moment. The culprit here was this Black Hat ransomware group. And Black Hat is in that V chart of those ransomware as a service operator or players. They're the ones on the top right. And so they have this tool that these criminals can use, the affiliates can use. And so on February 12th was actually when they first gained access to the network. So about 9 days they were in Change Healthcare's network before they launched the ransomware attack. That's where they were stealing all of that data. On March 1st, a $22 million payment was sent to a cryptocurrency wallet associated with these threat actors. So I think they did come out and confirm that they did pay that $22 million payment. There was this whole thing, we won't get into the details of it, but Black Hat tried to do this exit scam is what it's called. But long story short, the affiliate who actually launched the ransomware attack, Nachi, was never paid their portion of the ransom. And so because of that, Nachi was the one who actually had all of that data, all the 4 terabytes of data, and refused to delete it because they were never paid. And so uh, we assume, we're pretty confident that a second ransom payment was made. What happened was here, Nachi ended up posting on an underground forum that they were selling this data. They did remove that posting though, and we believe the reason was because they ended up, the Change Healthcare did end up making a second ransom payment. What was included in those details, the protected health information, was medical and dental records, payment claims, insurance details, personal information like social security numbers, and email addresses. The When they went back to see what had caused this incident, what the initial attack vector was, it was a remote access account. So somebody, when you're working from home, you can still access your business network. That connection, that password, was they were able to steal it and use that person's account to gain access to the network. They did not have multi-factor authentication enabled on that account. That is a industry best practice, a minimum best practice to have MFA for remote access connections, and they did not have that. And that was the initial attack vector in this entire incident. And we'll go through all of the cascading impacts that this had. And actually, in the next slide. So when this incident first happened, about a month after, United Health was like, oh, this is going to cost us about $872 million. And that was bad enough. And that was include that even though they paid those ransom payments, they still had that much in losses. And the amount of ransom, again, paled in comparison to what the total amount of losses was. They updated those numbers in, I think, late October of 2024. United Health reported $1.5 billion in direct response costs and an expected $2.87 billion in total cyber attack impacts for 2024. That was for 2024 because they're probably still having losses associated with this incident into 2025. The cyber attack affected 190 million individuals' protected health information. You might have gotten a notice in the mail regarding this in the fall after they conducted their investigation or concluded it. This is the largest known breach of protected health information. It's very sensitive information that can be used for identity theft purposes. That's why it's highly sought after by these cyber criminals. Um, and for the healthcare providers, 94% of all hospitals in the United States were financially impacted by this one incident. Of that, 60% of those hospitals lost at least $1 million per day that the incident was ongoing. 80% of physician practices lost revenue from unpaid claims because they couldn't be processed by Change Healthcare. And small practices, of course, were hit the hardest. They have the smaller margins from this incident. Ransomware attacks against the healthcare sector surged following this attack. But you can see there's a lot of kind of takeaways from this incident in that even if you pay the ransom, you don't know that your data is not going to be exposed still, or there's not going to be some sort of issue where now they're going to come back and ask for a second ransom payment. And so it's that word of caution on paying those ransoms. It's a caution to protect any sensitive information you have on your own network. There are some changes I think that'll actually be happening, hopefully at the federal government level, that requires healthcare organizations to protect their data more, so that if these incidents happen, people's information is not compromised. And a couple of last couple slides here, one on artificial intelligence, just because there's so much talk about it right now, with good reason. And there's concerns. And I'm just going to speak to the cybersecurity aspect of this. On the good side of it, we're using artificial intelligence for a lot of great things, for being able to detect malicious and suspicious activity more effectively. We can use generative AI type programs to write better alerts to find that malicious and suspicious activity. We can use it for automation, reducing human error, increasing our efficiency and effectiveness. But as with a lot of technology, we'll use it for our benevolent, means, and then the cyber criminals are going to use it for their purposes as well. And so they're automating their attacks more effectively. They're finding vulnerabilities quicker and more effectively. And they're using stuff like generative AI, and this is the biggest thing I want you to take away from this. We used to be able to identify phishing emails through red flags like weird spelling, weird grammar, upper and lowercase letters in the wrong spot, stuff like that. We are not going to be able to rely on that at all anymore. We shouldn't rely on that now because any cybercriminal can use generative AI like ChatGPT to write them a professional email asking for an invoice to be paid and to generate all of these phishing emails because there's nothing inherently malicious about asking for that type of information from those programs. So they're going to provide that information back. And so a lot of these cyber criminals are non-native English speakers. That's why we can use those red flags, or we used to be able to. They are now going to sound like native English speakers. Everything will sound very professional. So we need to be able to identify these as suspicious without relying on those old techniques. Voice replication is getting better. The deepfake photos are getting better. The videos, not as much quite yet, but I'm sure that that's going to get better sooner than later. And then, of course, to spread disinformation is a concern as well. For geopolitics, just a very quick thing here. While of course nonprofits should be exempt from any sort of targeting by anything that's happening in geopolitics, inevitably that could have happened, and has happened. When there are geopolitical conflicts that don't even directly involve the United States, US-based organizations could be impacted though and could be targeted. Typically by hacktivist groups, they might try to do more low-level cyber attacks. But it's just something to keep in mind, depending on who is involved in these conflicts, where the United States, has their support, might make your organization a potential target in these incidents. So we've seen a bit of that or quite a bit of that between Israel and Iran. Iran kind of sort of acting in support of Palestine. Really, it's just against Israel. It's not even in support of the Palestinian people and kind of targeting in that way for the perceived support of Israel by the United States or blatant support in some cases. Between Russia and Ukraine, now it's a little bit fuzzy where our support is sometimes, but our support is generally behind Ukraine, and so hacktivist groups and hacktivists are ideologically motivated cyber threat actors. They're not nation state supported, so they're not directed by the governments necessarily. They're just acting in support of an ideology. And so Russian hacktivists who are in support of the Russian government, they might then target United States organizations in an act against Ukraine. And on the right-hand side here is China and Taiwan. And there's been China wants this, what they call reunification of China, which would include trying to have Taiwan as an official part of China, not as a separate country. And there's a ton of history there. But if anything escalates between China and Taiwan, the United States has traditionally been in support of Taiwan. And so that could end up doing some cascading impacts there as well. Just as a kind of recap here, some of these, about half, are a little bit more IT focused, but for what we can do as everyday end users, having multi-factor authentication, updating our devices, updating our apps and our software, that's patch management to make sure that you're plugging any of these holes that could be used by these cyber criminals. Maybe you're choosing to use a password manager to make sure that you have strong passwords. Using caution with email, exercising that caution, maintaining awareness of the different cyber threats that are out there and the tactics that are used. The NJKIC, we are part of a state agency. Everything we do is at no cost. We have a distribution, or we have a membership. There's no fee associated with this, but you would get our distributions, which include a weekly bulletin that comes out on Thursdays, it'll be out later on today, as well as alerts and advisories regarding the different threats that are out there, different tactics and techniques. If there's new vulnerability, it's an easy way to just maintain that awareness. Kind of, you get those emails on Thursday, and you're like, oh, like, it's just a reminder to maybe exercise some caution, maybe take a better look at the emails that you're getting, the text message you're getting, the communications. And then the limit sharing of information that you have online, as much as you can. For businesses and organizations, you want to have information available for the people who might, are going to benefit from it. But limiting at least some information that could then be used to either target you or to impersonate you, can lower that risk a bit. For the other NGKIC services that we have here, we also have a grant If you're a public sector organization, we have grants available at the NJ although there are other grants, Homeland Security grants, and a bunch of others that can be utilized for cybersecurity purposes. Just wanted to mention that. There's a ton of information available on our website. Even if you don't become a member of the NJ you can just access all of that information. That will help you to understand the different threats, but also just advances in some technology. There's a whole explainer report on AI that talks about what it even is. We hear that term AI all the time, and a lot of people don't quite understand the different components of it. And so I think it gets a little bit technical, but it does it in such a way that you can really kind of follow the format of it, and kind of the you can see where those applications of AI can go. And so this is our information here, cyber.nj.gov. That if you do cyber.nj.gov/members, you will get to the web page to become a member of the NJ. If you're like, this isn't for me, you can always opt out of the emails if you don't like what you get. But you can also say your interest in training. Sometimes we have open training that's available to anybody that we offered again at no cost. And then if you want to reach out to us, I'll also put my work email in the chat here in case anybody wants to reach out. Otherwise, you can just reach out directly to the main inbox. A lot of us have access to that, so we will answer you, even if you don't contact me directly. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has now. I'll leave that open.
Yeah, we don't have anything in the Q&A. I know this is a lot of information
Yes.
for people to process. And you, as I said, you will be getting the recording so that you can come back, to listen again. And
Mhm.
Krista will be sharing her slides
Yes.
too, so that you don't, you'll be able to read it. It's certainly plan on sharing this too with your colleagues in your organizations. So as I said, as we said in our social media, this is not just for your organization. This is also benefits you personally. Uh,
Absolutely.
One of the questions that I had was, how do you, with text scams, how
Mhm.
do can people, how do they get access to your phone data? Do you have to click through, or are there ways where they can do that without you taking a specific action?
So the phone numbers, a lot of those are just revealed in data breaches. So, you sign up for some sort of service or you create an account and then that information gets exposed. There's a lot of data breach. T-Mobile had one not that long ago, where a bunch of people's information was exposed, and a lot of it includes phone numbers. And traditionally, we don't think of phone numbers as being quote unquote sensitive. It's not a social security number, but it's something that a cyber criminal can use then to target you. And so there's just a lot of ways where they're just generally exposed, and then they're shared. And that, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over that. If you have the option to not provide your phone number when you have to fill out those forms, don't. If you can choose not to, if as long as it's not a required field, I just wouldn't put it in there because that just makes it more, you're just exposing yourself a bit more that way.
The other thing that I have a friend who has a IT business, and this is happens a lot where the IT person will say, "Hey, we need to bump up your security, or maybe you should add this or do that."
Hmm.
And oh my gosh, that's going to cost, a couple $1,000s.
Hmm.
And this one, her client didn't want to do it and ended up spending over $200,000 in ransomware
Yeah.
and ransom payment. So that's the important thing too, is, many nonprofits, many of us don't have an IT department. We
Hmm.
don't have somebody on our staff who is
Yes.
technically that savvy. And so there are some services in the center. We have some resources and referrals we can make to organizations that provide IT service. For example, we have a partnership with the and JAMA, the New Jersey Association of Mental Health and Addiction Agencies. They
Hmm.
have the IT project, and they provide services strictly for nonprofit organizations. And it's really worth making sure that you're getting at least checked every so often to see what your level of security is. And even though it is an expense that I'm sure is probably not in your budget, it's
Mhm.
still something that is really, really important. Again, it doesn't matter when when nothing happens, but once it does, it's a big,
Right.
big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are about to launch a web page. It's I think we're calling it a vendor due diligence, and it's just something if you are it's a resource with the information that we've gathered. So we do security reviews for any vendors or third parties the state's going to use. And so it's not an endorsement of any of those companies that we use necessarily, but it's, hey, we've already done all these security checks. We've already made sure that they have this stuff in their contracts to ensure that our information is going to be safe using them as a third party. Because we found a lot of organizations and businesses don't when they decide to do business with an organization, they don't have in their contract anything related to cybersecurity. And so that'll be a good resource just to go in there to see, okay, well, they're probably pretty good with their cybersecurity if if they pass kind of our checks. So that'll be launched, I think, in the next couple of weeks.
That's fantastic. Oh, you do so much to
Yeah,
both protect and educate us.
yeah, we try.
I still don't see any more questions. Know that you will be able to, it's Krista, she shared her email here. I'll be putting it in the follow-up
Okay.
message too. And again, go to the cybernj.gov website and sign up and get information there. Remember that it's there as a resource.
Mhm.
Because I know sometimes I forget, oh, wait a
Yeah,
minute, I could go there, you know.
yeah,
The other
absolutely.
thing I was going to mention too is that as you were talking about communications
Hmm.
looking so authentic. I mean, as you were talking, I thought, well, wait a minute, let me just go. I went up to the NJ Kick website and I was able to copy your logo, and you'll see it when
Hmm.
I open start my
Yep.
slides. I put it in. So, and I do that all the time because I don't want to
Yeah.
have to bother the
Hmm.
organization to say, hey, send me your the graphic. But it's very, very easy to
Hmm.
quote steal this information.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
all right, I think I don't see any more questions. I'm glad that those of you who are attending are here, and as I said, everybody who registered will be getting a copy of this. Let me just share. I know we're running a little over time, and I apologize if you have to drop out. There is a brief survey at the end of this webinar. Please answer those questions. It shouldn't take you too long, and it really helps us know what we're doing right and where we can improve. So let me just share my slides briefly and there we go. Uh, so anyway, we just went through our questions. And again, if you have questions, you can follow up later. I just want to give you a little bit of information about upcoming events like this, where the Council of New Jersey Grant Makers has one of their conferences. They have two a year, and that's going to be held in Somerset on June 18th. Then we have every month we have a Policy World Wednesday where we talk about what's going on in the advocacy and policy world. We had one yesterday, and the next one is July 9th. There is the summer joint policy forum with the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits and the Council of New Jersey Grant Makers, with whom we partner. And that will be in New Brunswick on August 5th. And then finally, just mark your calendars for December 3rd. The first Wednesday of December is always the center's annual conference. And we invite everybody to participate. And we're looking for proposals right now for educational programs there. So we look forward to having you join us. Finally, we are a member organization. There are many benefits to being members, such as those of you who are getting this webinar for free. You get 30% off on our conference registrations, many other benefits. So please consider joining the center and strengthening the New Jersey nonprofit sector. If you're on this webinar or get the recording, you can also get 10% off your membership by using the code CourseNJ, all one word. When you do sign up for your membership, it'll ask for a discount code, and you can enter that and get 10% off. So thank you, Krista. I really appreciate all of this information. And as I said, there's that on a black background. There's that NJCCIC
Yes.
a logo that I just copied, just to illustrate how that works. Well, thank you all so much for participating, and I really appreciate uh, the information that NJ Kick is providing to our community.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you all.
Yeah.